Hi, Emanuele. Thanks very much for joining the podcast. I am very excited about this episode. We've been knowing for many, many years. Like I remember when you were my supervisors back in my bachelor of like doing the thesis. When I first like approached you, like there was like another friend of mine that was like your colleague, kind of like doing the PhD, that told me great things about you, how we are super technical, but at the same time interested in like doing research and in the entrepreneurial world. So it has been like a very cool journey. And then, yeah, we stayed in touch. I went to Zurich. You also went to Lausanne, like doing research, visiting and whatsoever. And so when you told me, yeah, Eric, I want to come to Silicon Valley, and you arrived, I think it's been like, it's been great. So super excited about this episode. I think you have like so many things that you can share to the audience and to the community. So super excited.
Thank you very much, Eric. But I think between the pair of us, you built the best startup, I would say.
I'm still at the very beginning. I think you already like did an exit, so maybe we can also talk about this. But I mean, it's super cool to see like how those like relationships kind of like develop like over the years. And so it's also like one of the cool things about the fellowship, that maybe people come here like a year ago or like a couple of years ago, and then they see that they got into Y Combinator, they are joining big tech companies, or like maybe they meet their co-founder. So that's super cool. Maybe, I don't know, if you want to start a little bit introducing yourself, how was like your journey here in Silicon Valley? I guess that maybe even like for the audience, you're maybe on the more senior position than like maybe the majority of the fellows that tend to be more on the younger side. So maybe you can also give your perspective on that.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe let's start with a little bit of context. I'm an engineer, bachelor and master from the University of Pavia, then PhD between University of Pavia and the EPFL in Lausanne. And before starting the PhD with four fellow friends from the University of Pavia, I founded Xtream, which became a boutique consulting company. We built digital products and AI systems for some of the best companies out there in Italy. We were totally bootstrapped, and we grew until 2 million euros turnover and €500,000 of profit. And then in September 2025, we were acquired by Team System, and we brought our skills and the internal products that we built with Xtream to the Team System group. In the meantime, we also created a spin-off from Xtream. It was called Ready. It was a copywriting platform for enterprises that was developed using lots of Gen AI. And it got a couple of very important customers, and Team System acquired it as well. So it was basically two exits at the same time. Yes.
Didn't know about the second one. Congrats.
Yeah. They bought the pair of them, and we were super happy because in Xtream, we tried for 7 years to build our own products and to launch them in the market. We were successful in building the products, not so much in selling them. We were never really capable of doing that. And therefore, entering Team System, we hope that finally we can exploit their sales department and their expertise in knowing the market of small and medium enterprises. And well, we hope to give a second life to our products. And in the meantime, I also became a professor with the Catholic University of Milan, and I'm now teaching the AI class in the Master of Science in Management and Innovation. So kind of a double career between academia and the industry. And I mean, super happy about it. Was kind of hard, but made a lot of sense. And well, I came to San Francisco immediately after the acquisition, honestly, in October. It was like the first vacation after years of startup, and it was super cool. It was super exciting. In San Francisco, you have an ecosystem that you cannot find in Europe anywhere, not even in Zurich or in Paris, in the biggest hub of technology there. And I mean, the first question you get asked in meetups and in pubs are, what are you building? Because people assume that you're building something, and yeah, that atmosphere, that energy is unparalleled here in Europe.
Yeah, definitely is. I mean, I've also like been in London, like in Zurich, like Milan, Barcelona. Of course, there are like so many talented people, but the energy that you feel here is like very different. And now that there is like this crazy AI wave, there are like many people that are also coming from like all over the world. So it's like super super exciting. And so it was like a period of transition for you, right? So for many years you were like grinding in the startup, probably not taking a lot of like vacations or like a lot of like rest time. So finally you had like a chance to maybe kind of like explore a little bit more. So how was like the experience for you in Silicon Valley, and what maybe you were able like to take home as like lessons or like insights?
So first, the experience was great. The experience was great, but in order to get the most out of the 2 weeks that you have there, because by the way, living in San Francisco is kind of expensive, so you get a limited time there, and you must make the most out of it. And the secret, I think, is what the guy that held my interview for the Silicon Valley Fellowship suggested me, that was prepare in advance. So get all the connections you can get from friends you have there and from people you know on LinkedIn, and just book appointments, just book meetings. People there are incredibly friendly. They answer to messages, which is weird if you are used to the European style. People do not reply. There they do. And they kind of never refuse a coffee with you. Maybe they give you just half an hour, but it's enough to get some very useful discussions. And if you get a little bit of time to study the background of the people you are meeting, I think that going there, not as a student, but as a professional with a little bit of experience, is extremely useful, because you can make the questions that really matter to you. Like, okay, as your startup grow, how can you delegate founder's responsibility, which is something that we never really managed to do well in Xtream. How do you choose your first hire, which when you're 24, it's not really something you think about. You just take whatever comes. And by the way, for us in Xtream, it was a very good choice, but I wouldn't say that it was a well thought choice. It was just, we were lucky. If I had to do it again, I would be a little bit more thoughtful about this choice. What do you look for in a new hire in the age of AI? It's not like deep knowledge of the syntax of a language or something like that, because that's not really useful anymore. So these kind of things, it's probably not something you think about when you are in the university, and for a good reason. You never face those problems. But if you give yourself 2, 3, 4 years in a startup or in a corporate, and then you go to San Francisco for 2 or 3 weeks, it's like doing an MBA in a very short period of time, and for, I would say, a fraction of the cost of a real MBA.
Yeah, definitely. I think like maybe something that we were also like discussing like at other times is that when you're young, maybe you're open to many possibilities, right? This is okay. I'm gonna conquer the world. I want to meet as many people as possible to increase like my sources of luck and everything. When you're like maybe more senior and you have like some experience, at that point you kind of like need to have like this mentality that you still want to be in the arena, and that you kind of like still want to be like a learning machine, because maybe at that time some people, they kind of like prefer to stay in the comfort zone. So maybe they are not so open to, let's say, okay, let's see what Silicon Valley has to offer me, what I can learn from like Silicon Valley people there, and I can apply to my own company. So I think that's something that of course like you had and you came, and it's been like very useful for you. But I would say in general, maybe it's not super easy. And also if you don't have maybe kind of like other people telling you like those things, maybe you realize, no, I'm kind of like too kind of like stuck in my position. And so it's like too late to do things. But reality is like never too late. And like being a learning machine is probably one of the biggest factor to kind of like being successful at your job and whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I would say that one of the most useful thoughts that you can have is someone out there has the same problem I have and is much, much better than me in solving them. So usually San Francisco is a good place to find those people. And your skill is really in asking the right questions. That makes a lot of difference, because I really felt the difference between a meeting that was a little bit improvised and one that I prepared for a couple of hours. If you prepare the meeting for a couple of hours, if you study the background of the person, if you think, oh, right, they can be very useful in solving this specific problem and not that other one, then you get much more value for the time you have. For example, when actually you invited Michael Greenwich, the founder of WorkOS, speaking there. Of course, if you look at his story, you know that he was extremely successful in scaling up a startup from basically a bunch of friends to the multi-million-dollar company.
And now they are everywhere, like even on the billboards in San Francisco, they are like growing like crazy with clients like Anthropic, OpenAI, Cursor, everybody.
Definitely. I saw a post from this guy on LinkedIn saying, oh, we have just struck our first 7-figure deal.
Yeah.
It's great. And you have this guy talking with you for maybe half an hour or 45 minutes. And you can ask like, all right, so when you scaled up, how did you make your people grow with you? Did you change the team, or was your team capable of growing with you? How could you recognize the people that were okay for the next stage and the people who weren't? These are hard questions, and they are not really something you can learn from Google or from books. You can only learn a little bit from people who have spent their life fighting these problems, and yeah, having a bunch of them in the same room, just very useful.
Yeah. I think that's simply incredible. And then also the other thing is that even if you don't want to move in Silicon Valley, I mean, it's not easy with the visa and it's maybe not a place for everybody. You still have like those connections, right? Because you can like still keep in touch with those people, kind of like learning ideas, updating like each other. So I think in the world that is like super connected as it is right now, this is something also like super important.
Yeah. So maybe if we want to give a little bit of a piece of advice to the next batch, from my side, it would be prepare your questions, prepare your sessions. Because, I mean, you may have to wait 2-3 years to get back to San Francisco. Yeah. Maybe you will stay there, but it's not very likely. So make that time count.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. That's, I mean, what we also like recommend. Like reach out to like maybe all the previous alumni like you that can also like tell you those things, gather as much context as possible, even like watching those like YouTube videos of like the previous talks that we upload. So when they're gonna like meet you for like the next batch, you have like more context about how they can be helpful, like what their interests are and all those different things. So definitely. So like maybe if we switch gears a little bit on like the startup world, like if you want to like maybe, I don't know, share a little bit more how was like your journey, because it was kind of like I would say a not so easy like strategy, right? So on one end you had like this academic life, and then on the other end kind of like building a company. So like mainly like bootstrapped in Italy. That, I mean, we know that with bureaucracy and everything was not super easy. So how was like your initial period? Like how were you able like to get started? Because usually something that people have in mind is that, okay, I have an idea, I go and pitch investors and I'm going to raise money for that. And I'm going to build like a moonshot like anyway. I think in your case, it was like more pragmatic. Okay, I want to build a company with my friends. I have expertise in engineering. And then I'm going to kind of like grow organically. And it's not that if it doesn't work in a couple of months, it's going to explode and then I'm going to find a job. So how was kind of like your thinking and your approach on company building at the very beginning? And then now, if you're going to do like a new company, how the approach will be different, like given all the learnings that you had in those years?
Well, these are very, very interesting questions. The first thing I'm going to say is when you just graduate and you are 23 without a family, without your own family, without a child to feed and so on, what do you have to lose? I mean, if you start a company and it doesn't go well, the worst possible thing that can happen is that you don't get any money for some month and then you shut down the company and you do something else. What have you lost? 3, 6, 12 months of salary? Not a tragedy, I would say, if you can afford it. In my case, it was mainly because of private lessons I gave at university that gave me a little bit of money to start the company without too much fear. I also worked during the last 2 years of university in a multinational consulting company, so a little bit of money from there as well. And that's actually a quite common thing to do an internship or have a job during the last years of university and save some money and say, okay, now I can try and see what happens. If you talk with the guys from Levels that are building an AI startup right now in Milan, they did the same. They had a 6-month internship in Amazon in Luxembourg. They got paid a lot of money, and in Luxembourg there is not much to do, so they saved a lot, and they said, okay, we can start from there and build our own company. So first thing that was a common decision criterion from me and my co-founders was, what do we have to lose? Nothing. And what do we have to gain? At the very least, a lot of experience. Because if you start a company, you have to do everything: accounting, sales, engineering, marketing, recruiting, hiring, whatever. It's all on your shoulders. So you learn like 10 times faster than in any other environment. So that is a decision that I would probably do again. Not sure if immediately after university, but I would do again. The stupid decision was to start a company and the PhD together. That was incredibly stupid and arrogant from my side. And it was even more arrogant when I realized that it was a very bad idea, but I didn't want to quit. And so I said, okay, I'll go until the end of the PhD, even if I know it will be kind of a mediocre research and it will be very, very hard to conciliate with the company. So piece of advice here, PhD, company are two very hard stuff. Don't try to do them together, because just one is very hard. Do them both means that you're going probably to be suboptimal in the and investors against bootstrapping. And that's one point where we will probably agree, because investors are a tool. If you need them, perfect, let's go for them. If you don't need them, why should you bother with raising money? I mean, having an investor in the board is annoying. It's a kind of it limits your options. It's someone else that you need to consult to make decisions. And it's someone that will probably sooner or later want their money back, probably 3x or X or whatever. So when we started Xtream, we wanted to fund a company to work well together. We didn't want to scale fast. We didn't want to become a unicorn. We didn't want to grow 10x every year like Anthropic is doing. We just wanted to work well together. And to get that goal, you don't need money. You just need a good service to provide to other companies or other people. And so it made a lot of sense to bootstrap the company. We hired a psychologist as our fourth employee. No investor would have ever allowed us to do that, because financially it was a very, very stupid decision. I mean, it's a lot of money in the salary of someone who is not going to sell, is not going to build. It's just there to make the life of other people a little bit better. It was probably a terrible investment for that time. Fast forward 7 years and we have a churn rate that is out of this world for our sector. We basically lost one guy because he went to CERN in Geneva, and another guy who went to Melbourne to follow his girlfriend who found a very strange PhD on botanic there. And for a tech company to kind of lose 2, maybe 3 people over 7 years is crazy. And that's how that investment returned. But with an investor, it would have been very, very hard to make it pass through. Yeah. Of course, if you want to grow quickly, if you have to invest a lot of money in marketing, or if you have to build a product before hitting the market, that's not possible. But it wasn't our case. So probably the lesson here is use the right tools for the job. And our job was to just create a company, boring business, growing slowly. And then we tried to make the startup when we had a little bit of revenues from consulting, and we started building our own products. And maybe fourth lesson, know your own limits. We tried like 5 times building a product and selling it. And 5 times we were kind of okay building the product and very, very bad in selling it. So, I mean, we would have needed to learn a lot about that. And I hope we will for the future.
Yeah, but at least like in this way, you are able like to stay in the game, right? Because
Yeah.
you also had the revenue coming from the consulting business, and so at the end, like you're also like able to get a good hit that you're able like to do an exit, right? With it. Otherwise, in many cases, it's a bit unfortunate because you kind of like go all in on that idea, and then if that idea doesn't work, or like maybe it's not the right time for the market, like whatever reason, there can be like many reasons for like a failure. You are screwed because at that point you just like need to find another job, and then it's gonna be difficult. Then I don't know, you find another job, you stay there for I don't know 3 4 5 years. Maybe at some point later in the life you have like some other things. So at that point you're not gonna build like a company, right? So if you're able like to stay in the game and then at the right time actually kind of like double down and accelerate when you already have like the resources in place, because at the same time you learn maybe how to recruit a team, you maybe like learn like many useful things. You have like you give yourself like way more chances, right, to make it. But it's not like the classic approach, right? You usually is okay, I'm gonna make money super fast right away, and otherwise if it doesn't work, whatever, I'm just gonna find a job and that's it.
Yeah, definitely. And probably, Alex, you can tell by yourself because you also bootstrapped your own company, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like for us, it was very crucial to actually build a long, sustainable business, right? So that it can become like a huge company, like, but not necessarily like 3 years. Is like basically the project of our life that we want to do for a very long time. And for us, it was all about the team, right? So kind of like working with my brother, working with Tommaso that I met here in San Francisco, and then it became more okay. Now we need to position ourselves in a way that we can actually give a good chance for us to make it work. But it was not like a very specific point solution. Okay, let's build this, and then if it doesn't work, we're just going to go back to Europe and we'll find a job. It was okay, let's build a company, and then it's going to be way more about kind of like developing the platform. So being very good at hiring talent, spotting talent. And that's why we opened the office in Buenos Aires. Now we're kind of like hiring the engineers there, and we can be a top employer there. Then we needed to become like very good at developing a product. I mean, it was actually the first time that we were like building digital products. I was like more into robotics, autonomous system. Tommy was like more into like marketing, finance. Patrick was just like a dropout from university. So I think that is also very important, that you need to be realistic. It's not that, okay, first try and then I'm going to build like the next Anthropic right away. Of course it's possible, but it's like a cash and core, right? So you want to be in a position that you're able to win, and just not just be like a lottery ticket. So I think that's very important. And then maybe I think another topic that is not super covered is kind of like the exit part, right? Because of course usually we hear about the big exits, right? So I don't know, Meta, like Facebook acquiring Instagram for like billions of dollars. But I mean, for like many companies that are like very other players, I think in Europe, like the M&A market, of course, is not as well developed as maybe in the US. There are like way less private equity firms. We don't have like the big tech companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Cisco, kind of like acquiring many companies every year. How did you kind of like approach this? I mean, of course, like first question will be, did you want to sell the company? Like they approached you, and then how was kind of like the process even to find the right buyer?
That's a very good question. I would say that it was not on purpose. We didn't want to sell the company. Actually, we got several offers, mainly from well-known system integrators and consulting companies over the first 5 years of Xtream. But we never even listened to them because that was like the word that we wanted to change. Xtream was founded to become a better tech consulting company, and just joining the old stuff sounded a little bit like betraying our mission there. In 2024, when we started talking with Team System, in the space of 3 weeks, we received 3 very interesting offers for a buyout. One from a strategic consulting company, one from a system integrator that also had some proprietary products, and the third one was from Team System. And there we sat a little bit together, the founders, and we realized that Xtream was growing fast, mainly on the wings of the AI wave. But the problem was we were growing with mainly the same people we had from the beginning. I mean, our seniors were basically our first hires. And it was okay, but these people were growing faster than the company. So either we had to grow very fast to give them the opportunities to have teams, to have their own teams, and also to get much higher wages, or we would need to sell. The options were basically grow very fast, like X each year for a couple of years, or just sell and change business model. And changing business model was particularly attractive for us because, again, we always wanted to be a product company. We never succeeded in pivoting from consulting to product, which is, by the way, something that other companies are trying to do with some success and others with no success at all. By the way, Levels, the one I mentioned before, has pivoted from consulting to product, and they're now building their own product. We'll see if they manage to succeed in that. So it is possible. It is very, very hard. It is very, very hard. So we said, look, it's not something we will be able to do by ourselves in a short time because, again, our turnover in that year was around 1.5 million euros. So to just drop all these revenues and like feed a team that large building products, we would have need some external help. And entering a group that was building digital products was like the best possible thing that we could think about. And therefore we evaluated all the free offers for a long time, like for a month. We were discussing with all these contenders. And at the end of the day, joining this system seemed like the best way forward, just because it was giving us the opportunity to become a product company very, very fast. Like now the integration is almost completed. And like 6 months after the deal was signed, are 85% a product company. And yeah, one thing I would say is that when you think about an exit, you think about Scale AI, you think about WhatsApp, you think about Instagram. But for an entrepreneur to hit such an exit is as likely as for a basketball player to play in the NBA. It's very, very hard. And it's, in my opinion, unreasonable to start a company hoping for that exit there. Because it may happen. You're great if you can manage to get there, but it's very unlikely. But even doing an exit, which is much more modest, if you have a significant share of the company, can like make it
can be literally life-changing, even financially. Like
yes, can literally give you the opportunity not to work for the rest of your life. And I mean, the Xtream plus Ready exit did not make the first pages of the newspapers.
Millions of dollars.
No, definitely not. But nowadays, at least the founders are like okay for the rest of their lives. And even some of our employees have got a significant boost to their financial situation with this acquisition. It's a very good way to conclude an entrepreneurial adventure. I would say the message can be, do not only aim for the unicorn, even just a more modest company can make you very, very happy.
Yeah, definitely. And then also there are, if you think about it on like expected value, right? It can be like very different, right? Because in one case it's like, okay, go hard or like go home. That of course depends what are the incentives, right? If you're like an investor, like if I want to invest in startups, I want to like give them like the chance to become like unicorns, like huge companies, right? And then if they fail, okay, they're going to find another job or they're going to do something else. But of course, if you're the founder, then you only have like one bullet, right? That is basically your company. So like it makes sense. And maybe you don't really want to, okay, I'm going to like do an IPO, or that is like extremely unlikely, or otherwise I'm just gonna fail and I'm gonna find a job. So that Definitely makes a ton of sense. And then like maybe regarding the negotiation, like it was something new, right? It was of course like the first time for you. So how were you able like to maybe get some advice or kind of like navigate like this part? Do you have like maybe some tips that might be useful for this?
So the first tip I would give is build yourself an option. If you basically have no other option than to sell to the people you're talking to, negotiating becomes tough. And second one would be study. I mean, you can have advisors, you can have friends, you can have your lawyers, but at the end of the day, a person negotiating will be yourself. So if you want to really do something that has a huge return over investment, is just reading some books about negotiation before sitting at a table. Like one I really like is Never Split the Difference by Chris
I was
Voss.
thinking about the same one. Yeah, it's like the bestseller.
That was very enlightening to me. And by the way, another point is that everything is up to negotiation. It's not just about the price. It can be about the price. It can be about the earnouts. Earnouts are sums of money that you collect over the years after the acquisition as a function of your results in the new company. And it may be about your wage once you enter the new company. It may be about your employees' benefits. It may be about the working conditions that you're going to have in the new company, whatever. You can negotiate basically on everything. It may be about your lock-in, maybe about your payment conditions, and so on. So study, build yourself an alternative, and negotiate over literally everything. And by the way, being in a hurry is against your interest. Our negotiation took like 15 months from the first discussion to the final act, which is honestly too long. But it is okay. At the end of the day, if it is a life-changing sum of money, you can wait. And waiting a little bit and getting something more is better than rushing at getting something less. Yeah, and also it's
Yeah, go for it.
last point, it's very important to have some good lawyers, not for drafting the contracts. Gemini is probably better, but for giving you options that you had not thought about. I'll give you a very concrete example. Usually when you do an exit, the buyer pretends some guarantees over your company. For example, if the police knocks at your door and says, "Oh, you have evaded taxes," you are responsible, not the buyers, of course, because you made a mess. And if the buyer needs to pay, they want to be able to turn to you and say, "Okay, now you give me the money back." It makes sense. And sometimes they demand something like a ransom, so a sum of money that you deposit there for them to be able to take it if something bad happens. In that case, there are several different ways to set aside that sum of money. The buyer can withhold it, or you can keep it in a separate bank account or other forms. And some of these strategies are more advantageous to the buyer, and some are more advantageous to the seller. And if your lawyer can tell you all the possibilities, you can negotiate the one that is most advantageous to you, which is usually you get the money in a separate bank account, and if something bad happens, the buyer has to file a suit to get the money from you.
Well, makes sense. And like maybe I wanted to ask you, like not in your specific case, but in general, like how does these are like structured? So like the exit number is like a multiple of like EBITDA, like maybe for like more private equity, or for if companies are not profitable, kind of like multiple of revenues. It depends on the sector. Then there is like the lock-in period. They want to keep maybe the founders or like part of the team. They give you maybe some money in cash or some money in like the equity, like stock of the company. So for the type of companies that you built, what's like an average, I don't know, type of deal usually?
So for a consulting company, like was predominantly Xtream at the time it was acquired, you get a multiple of the adjusted EBITDA, so adjusted profit margin. Usually that multiple in Italy is between 6 and 8. So if they propose you less than 6, if they propose you more than 8, then it's probably a good deal. Of course, there are many possible variations to this, but this is like the baseline. All in cash or in shares. So when you get acquired by a company that is like 3 order of magnitudes larger than yours, they don't want to give shares, especially if they're not publicly traded and they're owned by private equity. So the whole sum gets paid in cash.
I
And
remember
that's
one of the first mistakes that Google did, that when they acquired YouTube, it was kind of like some cash and some equity. And then, of course, like the equity appreciated like crazy. So it was like super expensive acquisition.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, especially companies that are owned by private equity or they have a large share of their equity in investment funds, they don't want to give away equity. They pay you cash and that's it. And I mean, it's also very good for the founder. Lock-in is something that is very, very hard to evade, especially if they're buying not just the company, but also the skills of the team. So if you want to do an exit, be prepared to negotiate hard on the lock-in and be prepared to accept some lock-in. Because on the side of the buyer, if they buy a company of 25 people with 5 founders and the 5 founders go away the following day, the company is not going to do well in the following month. So basically they have paid you a lot of money for nothing. Doesn't make any sense. And there is always a little bit of enterprise value paid as an earnout, because of course they want to motivate you to keep pushing for the following years. So even if they lock you in and they say, oh, you cannot go away, they also provide you with financial incentives to do well in the following years. So that's the basic structure of a deal.
Makes sense. Well, maybe if we want to talk a little bit about like the AI stuff that is like happening like in this period, you have seen it from like the industry like point of view, right? Like building the company and now was like working for a big corporate, and then also from the more research like academic side. So what do you think is gonna happen like in the next few years? What is like interesting for you? Is like a particular application or like a particular product that you love that you're kind of like tinkering with?
Oh, yeah. By the way, maybe I can add a couple of details to the previous answer because they may be useful to other founders. In Italy, there is a weird rule that says that if you own shares of a company on the 1st of January of a specific year, you can value and tax the appreciation at 18%. And then if you sell the company for the value you have used for the appreciation, there are no taxes. So you pay 18% on the profit you make over your shares. That is 8% lower than the usual tax on stocks, that is 26%.
Yes.
I've never understood that rule, but it's favorable to founders. So be aware that it is there. And another very important thing is if you want your employees to profit from an exit, you can build a stock option plan and provide them with shares with a very complex vesting strategy, and then say, oh, if somebody buys the company, the vesting is immediate.
Yeah, you accelerate it.
And this works as well because your employees will be taxed at 26% over the profit on their stock option that became shares. That is much, much lower than the usual taxation on salaries. Therefore, it's the best possible way to give money to the employees in an exit, doing something like this.
Yeah, maybe like in terms of culture, like of course here in Silicon Valley it's like very common, like everybody does stock option. In Italy, not so much, right? Usually employees tend to prefer like cash, or they don't even know maybe how it works, the vesting, the cliff, all those different things.
And also you have to say people do not value equity as much as real money. So if you give 1% of equity to someone, when you hire them, they will say it's not worth anything, even if maybe in 2 years it's worth 100,000 euros. They don't care, which is a pity, but it's the way it is.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Nice.
Back to AI. So, well, concretely, the most disrupting thing I would say it's happening is the way AI is making software development easy for everyone. That's a real game changer for everyone wanting to build a digital product, because now product design and engineering are converging. If before you needed 3 people, now we are converging into one if they are good enough to study a little bit of each discipline. So this is interesting. If I had to find something on the academic side for AI, I would say the most interesting part is AI explainability. People from Anthropic have a very interesting blog that is called Transformer Circuits, and they publish their research about LLM interpretability. If I had to start a PhD tomorrow, I would definitely go for that topic, because it's a problem that is not solved yet, and it has very, very important implications on AI safety, on the improvements of large language models, on the controllability of large language model, on the optimization of large language models. So many opportunities can be unlocked by research there, and we know almost nothing.
Yeah, I think like if people are interested in some literature, even on YouTube, there is a ton of material from Neil Nanda that was also kind of like a leading expert like in this field. So he's also like commenting papers, stuff like that. So I think that will be a great starting point. Then there are also like some fellowships about it, like maths, like other similar ones. So you can also have the chance maybe with to research with an anthropic researcher, like other people in academia, if you're very interested in this field. And then also like more senior people are doing it. So maybe they leave their job and then I had like a person that here in Silicon Valley was working for a big tech company, and then she left, and then she kind of like did this internship, I think in Berkeley, for like this fellowship, and then she kind of like became more an expert in this like AI interpretability. So that for sure is like super interesting. And how have you seen like like maybe this disruption of AI in the academic sector? You've been a student yourself. You're also like a professor in university. How like do you think that students can take advantage of this? But also on the other end, do you think like professors are gonna kind of like maybe change like their way of teaching, and then also like how universities, what's gonna be the role of schools or like universities in the future now that we have all these capabilities, also with kind of like more personalized tutoring. You can talk a lot with the ChatGPT or like with Claude.
So I think that the question about students is the easiest one, because they can benefit a lot from the ability of AI to process material. So if you have like lecture notes or slide decks from professors or handwritten notes from a friend of yours, and then it's very, very easy to transform them in the format that is best for your study. May it be a conceptual map, may it be a list of bullet points, may it be flashcards, whatever. You can really get the format that you need. And as well, you can get a tutor that can spar with you in challenging your knowledge of a subject. So if at my time we had friends testing us before the exam, now you can just do it with Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude, and it's gonna be probably much, much better than your friend. Yeah. On the professor side, that's much harder, because most of our university system was designed to teach you knowledge, and it's becoming increasingly hard to test how well people have learned, because today, if you give an assignment, it's very, very easy to do with AI without any real contribution from your side. Yes, at the exam you can ban AI. It makes sense for some classes. It doesn't make sense for other classes, because if in the real world AI is a tool, then an exam without AI would probably not be really useful to prepare people for the real world. So I don't have an answer, honestly. I have chat with many colleagues of mine about this issue, and there is no consensus yet. what I'm trying to do this year, and it's a first, I'm testing it and we'll see. I have the exam simulation in 2 weeks, so we'll see how it goes, is to have an exam that is made of two parts. One part is closed books. So you need to have some knowledge of the matter in order to succeed. And the second part is practical with everything you can find on the internet. So you can use Claude, you can use ChatGPT, you can use Gemini. Of course, the question is made so that the free versions of tools is enough. You don't need the paid version. But this way you can test people both ways, both for their knowledge and for their ability to collaborate with AI to solve real problems. We'll see how it goes. I have no idea, honestly. But this is an option. For universities as a whole, it's even harder. Because think about software development. I was talking with a VP from a cybersecurity firm a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me, look, now we hire people for their ability to review code, not for their ability to write code. Fine. How can you be very good at reviewing code without being very good at writing code? And if you never wrote that code because you are native from an era where AI can write code maybe better than you, how can you acquire that skill in the first place? That, I don't know. Maybe you have the answer.
Well, that's very true. Maybe at some point, like even reviewing the code is gonna be kind of like automated away. And I think what I've seen is that the people that are not just like vibe coding and like putting crap in production or out there in the world is when you're able to kind of like automate a lot of like the tests. So actually the agent is actually able to create the test for the stuff that is building. And so like in this part, I've seen that has been like particularly useful. But I don't know, things are like developing so fast that even for like the hiring market, it's changing so fast. Like even ourselves, like before we were kind of like used to ask the classical coding interviews, like on lead code and stuff like that. And then we realized that there are like so many ways like to cheat and it's not very representative of if that engineer is going to be a good one or not. So now we kind of like do more maybe like work trials. So at least maybe like needed to develop a new feature, like maybe solve some bugs, came up with like new ideas that might be useful for the growth and like for the product. So I think this it might be like more reasonable. Maybe still on this topic, what do you think that maybe young people or like in general, like people that want to maybe get a job in tech or like maybe people that they want to like build a product and like get users, what they can do? Because something that I've noticed from you that you've done in the past few years is actually a lot of sharing. So you kind of like became like a LinkedIn influencer almost, like you have more than 30,000 followers, something like that. So like posting a lot of stuff, maybe even like speaking at conferences, like as a speaker, or you've been in Lausanne, like London, many other places. So maybe I guess that this also helped you to kind of like get to know other people, so like other opportunities, but also like other people maybe like recognizing you for the kind of like insights or like expertise that you can share on AI.
Yeah, so I would say for big tech, for entry-level roles, what really works is just to apply and then prepare the interview as if it was a university exam. So you have to do a lot of lead codes. You have to watch YouTube videos about how to do a behavioral interview because, I mean, it's basically an exam of pattern matching. You should understand which pattern you're required to follow in the lead code and which pattern you are required to follow in the behavioral interview. That's it, I would say. For the rest, expose yourself is always very good because if people call you and you're not the one applying to positions, then you are in a much better position to choose your dream job and in a much better position to negotiate your conditions. Again, also in jobs, I think everything can be negotiated. Conferences are a great way to do it. Building open source projects is another great way to do it. Posting on LinkedIn works. What I would do probably different if I had to start over today is quality over quantity. I went to lots of conferences, sometimes presenting suboptimal talks, I would say. And honestly, I did it mainly because we needed customers for Xtream. So it was a marketing operation. And I posted lots of posts on LinkedIn that were not great, I would say. it's probably better to post a little bit less, but with higher quality, and maybe to just have a keystone piece of content which is very strong, and then have many satellite posts that take different views on the same content or take different parts of the same content. That is something I've seen other people do on LinkedIn. One guy who's very good at it, it's Massimiliano Viola.
Yes, he has also been a fellow actually. So it's great. He's posting a lot of stuff about computer vision, like machine learning. And it's crazy because he was also kind of like engineer, like introverted and everything. And then he became like so good at also like sharing in public news and everything. So nice. He's also actually like moving to San Francisco as well with the visa and everything. So that's very great.
And the other thing I would say is great to get a very good job is just not being afraid of reaching out. It doesn't work really well with Google or Meta because they have very strict procedure and you cannot cut corners. But if you want to work in a startup, even in a very good startup, just message the founder on LinkedIn. Who cares? The worst thing that can happen is that they do not get back to you. Fine. You have lost the time required to make some research, draft a very good and carefully written message and sending it. It is how much? 16 hours of your life? Fine. It's an investment worth making if you think that on the other side is your dream job. So if you build a good reputation with exposure, being it with open source, LinkedIn posts, conferences, you choose your way, posts on Medium and so on. And you then reach out to the key people of your dream companies. Again, it works well with small companies, not so much with big techs. Then it's not unlikely that someone will notice you.
Yeah, it also like shows a lot of agency.
Yeah.
Actually, in our case, when we hardly had engineers in Argentina, we also host like some events with like the Silicon Valley Fellowship mission to Argentina and everything. So that also helps kind of like gather like-minded people. And I remember that there was like this guy that actually was not living in Buenos Aires. So he took a flight. He spent like a couple of nights in Buenos Aires just to attend our event. And then basically at the event, he got to know Patrick like in person. And so we kind of like started like the interviewing process, and all the interviews like went well. It's like the work trial. He was like a strong fit, a strong engineer. And at the end we hired him. But of course he was able to even like distinguish himself among like the like thousands of applications because he actually showed up. And even if it was not around the corner, a flight, he got to know like my brother in person. And then, of course, that was a strong signal. Then, of course, you also like need to have the skills to kind of like pass the technical interviews and to be proficient at your job. But I think that is also like something pretty strong. And in the same, it also happened with the fellows, that maybe they are people that live in Europe or like in Asia, in other parts of America. They actually come here to Silicon Valley and then they get to know like face to face, like maybe the founders. And so in many cases, they were like even able to get hired by them just because they showed up. And of course, they had the skills and everything. But I think in a world where there's like more and more competition and like the barrier to entry for everything is kind of like lower because the knowledge is like everywhere, like having high agency is something very, very, very important for like working in a company, but even building your own company is like super, super crucial.
And by the way, I would say that against common belief, it also works in academia. Because if you want to get a PhD or a research position, well, there is one person you need to convince, and it's the professor that will be your principal investigator. And therefore, reach out to them. The worst possible thing is that they never reply. Who cares? They will never remember you, and even if they do, you don't care because you didn't get the position. So I know people that got into ETH or into Berkeley just because they had a good paper and they sent a very good email to one professor. So what you have to gain is so much more than what you have to lose to send that email that it really makes no sense not to send it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Is there like maybe something that at the moment are you reading or like are you watching like some podcasts or like some books, movies, or even like tools that you like really recommend?
So I'm really into vibe coding products like Lovable and V0. Not to build products, but to build consensus in stakeholders. Because a prototype of the product is the best possible specification you can have. And being able to build it in 4 hours is amazing. So you can go into a meeting and say, look, this is what I mean. And by this, you can point to the product itself. So that works much, much better than slides or Canva or whatever. And the other thing is really GenAI interpretability research. So that transformer circuits paper and other papers from DeepMind and so on related to the topic. They're just very, very interesting. And maybe last thing I can suggest is a YouTube channel. It is called Welsh Lab, and they have amazing insights about scaling laws, grokking, mechanistic interpretability, and so on. They have short videos, something like 3 Blue 1 Brown.
Okay.
In as the type of format, but only on AI and machine learning. So super interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for the recommendation. Maybe as kind of like a conclusion, do you have like some advice, something that you want to share with the audience? Like, I don't know, maybe people interested in like going to Silicon Valley, people that are already in Silicon Valley that are very interested into AI in the tech sector, something for the audience?
Well, a very powerful tool in San Francisco that works even in Italy, but in Italy it's much slower and more difficult to apply, is social graphs. Like if you want to talk with person A and you do not know person A, but you know person C that know person B that knows person A, just ask for infos. And eventually you will get where you want. And it's much, much easier than just going straight for person A, especially if you want to ask something from them, not just to talk.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Who are mean, of course, is like way better than just like cold outreach. So if people want to reach out to you, like what's the best way?
LinkedIn. Just send a message on LinkedIn and I try to reply everyone, not immediately. I'm kind of bad at it, but just send a message on LinkedIn and I will try to reply.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you very much then, Emanuele. See you around.
Thank you, Eric. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
As always. Bye.